Hey everybody, it's Matt. Welcome back to the Journey Church podcast. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you can automatically get our weekly episodes. And you might want to go ahead and subscribe to our Journey YouTube channel as well. You'll find messages, music, interviews, inspiring stories, and more for you all right there. Now, I hope this episode helps you take your next step in following Jesus.
I want to start today by giving you a test. Sort of. It's a joy assessment. Are you guys ready for the joy assessment? I will be the teacher and I will give you, I have one guy. Okay, good. You're ready? Good. You get ready. You just shout out your number, okay? You're going to be on a scale of 1 to 5. 1, no joy. Joy, number 5, like total joy, absolute joy, whatever joy looks like for you. Let me show you the difference between joy in my household. Okay, this is me, Joy. This is my wife, Joy. Okay, just so you know, I'm not judging. I'm just telling you, joy looks different on everybody. So your joy is your joy, but you rank yourselves. I got 3 assessment questions for you to rank your joy in. Here's number 1. All right. Your boss recognizes your contribution and gives you a bonus or a raise. You a 1 or a 5? Okay, we got some 5s in the room. Anybody like a 3? One person's 3. She's like, no, I'm retired. I don't want a job. I get it. Okay. So yeah, this is an easy one, right? It's a 5. You get excited about this, right? Let's look at number 2. Assess your joy on this one. Your friend surprises you with tickets to a concert, game, or big event, whatever it is you love, on your birthday. And you're like, what? Is that a 5? For some of you in the room, it's a 1. I don't like surprises. Right? And you're like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. I can't get ready for that. But still, you'd go, right? You'd have a good time. That'd be fun. All right. What about this one? Last question, last quiz. You're leaving work early for that trip or vacation you've been planning for months. What's it like walking out the doors? It's a 5. That day before vacation is the best day at work ever, right? Y'all got it. I'll see you. Like, oh gosh, I'm already thinking about next June. Anyway, here's what I want to do. As you think about these scenarios, this is why we've been talking about this, but I want to throw one question that applies to all 3 of these real quick that's going to bring us back into our big topic for this series, is that what if in each of those situations, it wasn't you getting it? How do you rank your joy if it's the guy next to you or your neighbor who's getting that? Where's your joy on that scale? 0. At least there's one honest person in here, right? No, but let's just be honest. Like, does your joy drop just a tad? Yeah. So here's what I want to jump into. We've been in this series because I'm concerned about the World Happiness Report. I'm concerned that the U.S. for the last 6 years has been dropping in total joy and happiness. That doesn't seem right for our nation. As wonderful as my life is and our life is in here in this country, that we should be a little happier. Maybe we're just like missing something. And mental health professionals tell us that in the Thanksgiving Christmas season, the time of joy, and this season when we should be grateful and everything should be good, that everything dips emotionally. For some reason, people are sad and depressed. That's just not right. I just want to help us change our perspective. So last week, our bottom line was this. We said last week, here's what we want to base everything on. Our perspective determines our outlook and our attitude. And I'm not going to go through the whole sermon, obviously, from last week. You'll have to go watch that if you missed it. But here's the short version. We learned from a guy named Paul. He wrote a letter to his friends called the Philippians. And he wrote this letter. He talks to them in there that basically joy is a perspective. You can choose it. He chooses to rejoice while he's writing this letter in jail because he knows God must be at work in and through him. In fact, he can see how God is working because as he's living his life in the midst of this terrible circumstance, God is still using him to move people closer to Jesus. Like something good is still happening even though it's not happening to me. And here's the perspective switch I want to help you think about today. What if we are missing out on joy because we only have joy and celebrate when it happens to me? Like just think about the most joyful people in your life right now and how much you love being around them. I'm not gonna mention this person's name, but anybody here shop at Kroger? Nobody shops at Kroger? Okay. If you shop at Kroger, you're gonna know who I'm talking about. I'm gonna not say his name, but when I go to Kroger, there's a certain person at Kroger. Don't say his name. It's all good. Listen, is this guy not the most joyful person to be around? You'd rather wait in line Then go to the self-checkout and get out quicker because why? You get to interact with this guy who loves his job and loves you for the fact that you're bringing things to him to scan, right? So listen, let me ask you a few questions. Do you love being around joyful people? Yes. Do joyful people make you more joyful? Yes. Do you want to be a joyful person for the people around you? Yes. Easy. Let me tell you about the opposite story. Back at another job that I had, there was this guy I worked with. And he complained about everything. I was a teacher at the time. We were at the school. And I would come in. We would eat lunch together. And he would never ask me about anything good going on in my life. He would just immediately go, ugh, the students, am I right? And he would just complain about somebody and then he would complain about the emails he got. And then he'd complain about the teacher down the hall who couldn't they would hit reply all to an email. They shouldn't hit reply all to. And I was like, what is wrong with you? And I would look at him sometime and be like, are you retiring soon? He'd be like, I hope so. I was like, we all do too. Like non-joyful people make everything worse. And here's what I know about everybody in the room. Nobody wants to be a stick in the mud. But don't we sometimes carry that around with us as if this is the way my life is? This is the way it is. This is the way we are. This is just what it is. Listen, here's what I think is the difference. We tend to only celebrate the things that happen directly to me. In fact, here's today's bottom line. Before we even get to the verses to prove it, here's what I think you guys need to understand. Selflessness sets us up for joy. In fact, the most joyful people I know borrow joy from everybody they interact with. And I think that's the key to why they're so joyful. They're not waiting for it to happen to them. They just borrow everybody else's joy and they get all filled up and they're like dancing in the rain. I don't know, right? But something's different about the way you interact. So here's what I want to do. I want to explore the next set of Paul's letter, where he actually talks about how this works in an everyday, absolutely so ground level way that I think it's something we all this week could take with us and apply. Whether you're a Jesus follower or not, you could make your workplaces and your family and your neighborhood more joyful just by remembering this one simple thing. And I'm going to give you some really, really, really practical things to do to make sure this becomes your new perspective on how to pursue joy in everyday life. Are you ready? Let's jump in and see what Paul says to his friends. He says, let's start out this section. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. I have a problem with this word nothing. Because in the Greek, the word means nothing. It means nada. You don't get to do anything. But I need to protect my reputation. I'm not talking about your reputation. I'm saying protect your reputation, but let's just be honest. What Paul's saying is here, nothing you should do should be aimed at you making it look like you're the man, right? Nothing you do should just be aimed at yourself. Paul's just saying, like, nothing in your life should be about you doing it for you. That's really hard because every one of us wakes up every day just making sure that I look better than the guy next to me at work and I got to get mine and I got to get it. We think about us all the time. And Paul just wants to shift our perspective to go, nothing. Just take it off the table. It's not for you. It's not for your vain conceit. It's not for all that. Well, Paul, what am I supposed to do? Think about other people all the time? That's what he says next. It's kind of depressing, really. Rather, in humility, value, read it with me, others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. Now, here's what's interesting. Paul's not saying you're not valuable. Paul's not saying, hey, make sure you lower yourself and that you're nothing and everybody else is great and you're nobody and just don't. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying here is he's saying you're looking to others as if they're the VIPs in the room. And he said the way this should work great is if everybody else in the room is also doing that, so everybody treats everybody else with a mutual respect and a mutual encouragement so that we're all looking out for each other's interests. Now, you've experienced this in some workplaces, haven't you? Let me tell you where you haven't experienced this. As a parent at a soccer or a basketball game, you know what I think is interesting? I think it's very interesting that I grew up playing basketball. And I think it's interesting that everybody forgets that guy wearing the striped uniform is a human being. and that for an hour we all get the permission to make his life or her life miserable, right? We're like, my interest is that, but that's my team, and that's my interest. Like, think about that, how you do that at work. Everything that comes across your desk, if you think about it through your own interest, where you're going. What if the shift was to actually think about the things that come to you as how you could use in terms of the interest for others? How would that change the way you should treat parents at a soccer or a basketball game? I'll just tell you, those of you who are track and cross-country parents, you've got this nailed. I've been around you long enough. Y'all don't even worry about this whole competition thing. You're cheering on every single person who's running and jumping, and I'm like, that's where I want my kids. Just so you know, that's my bias, but I'm there, okay? It looks like that. Everybody's interest is on your plate, and you're looking out for them. You're watching for their interest. You're looking out for what they can do, and this is what we get a chance to do. When we do that, everybody else starts looking out for your interests. And you're like, yeah, but is that the way it really works? No, not in every case. Not in every case, and you know this is true. There are some situations where you try to do this, and people don't respond in kind. Because you get a pass with those people, right? I don't got to work out for those interests. Those people's interests, I'll just do the people who return it in kind. No. Paul says, well, wait a minute. That's not what I mean either. Because Paul is not taking this from his own life experience. And this is what I think is interesting. Paul's about to turn to Jesus' life. Paul's teaching here is not about him figuring up something out the way he responded to people and they respond to him. He's not talking about something where it's in kind. He's talking about an ideal that he saw and watched Jesus live, and then it changed the way Paul thought about joy. And you're like, well, what's the connection to joy? I'm going to get there in a second. But Paul's basically trying to point out to us that before joy is humility. Because humility leads us to look out for the interests of others. And if you want to get this right, you do it like Jesus did it. Well, how did Jesus do it, Paul? Let me show you what he says about it. He says, in your relationships with one another, have the same attitude as Christ Jesus. And I think this is interesting. He's like, this was Jesus' attitude. It wasn't something that Jesus was doing in order to get back. It was just his underlying attitude in everything he did and everything he worked for and everything he did for other people. This one attitude flowed through everything. Well, what was that attitude? Here's what his attitude was. That attitude in Christ Jesus was who, being in a very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Now, I know you've heard this talked about before if you've been in church at all. But listen, if you're not a church person, if you're not a Jesus person, and you're not sure about the Jesus thing, let me point out something that kind of blew my mind this week as I was reflecting on this. Paul is writing this, and whether you believe Jesus was the Son of God or not and came to die for your sins on a cross and come back to life, whether you believe that or not, Paul believed it. And Paul believed that his God, who was fully living inside of Jesus as a human man, came to earth, and instead of using his power for his own good and to let everybody know he was here, he just went around and served the interests of other people. In humility, rather than using his godness for his own goodness, he used his godness for the goodness of others. Now watch this. Let me play out a scenario out here, and here's how the connection, I think, makes it to joy. And here's what I think Paul is pushing at. Paul knows Jesus was all over the place in serving people. I want you to think about how many people went to Jesus to get healed. And I don't know about you, but those of you who are in the room who are hoping for healing this week, what would your attitude be if there's this guy who has this power to heal people and he's giving it away for free to anybody who will come and just ask? And Jesus, people are coming to him all the time going, I've got this, my daughter's sick, and I've been sick with this disease for years, and he goes, hey, in your faith you were healed. Let me ask you, scale of 1 to 5 on the joy scale and assessment, how happy are you got healed? 5. 8. Off the scales, right? So let me tell you, humility came before the joy, didn't it? Because not only was Jesus humble enough to give his gifts away, but the people coming to Jesus were humble enough to ask. And in this moment, I started to realize, oh my goodness, it's true. People didn't just come to Jesus because he was powerful. They came to him because he was joyful. Jesus was full of joy. And why was he full of joy? because all of his goodness was wrapped up in the good of the people around him. And suddenly this week, guys, my mind exploded. It was like, oh, I get it now. This is why the Pharisees, who didn't agree with anything Jesus said, wanted to have him to dinner. This is the same reason why Matthew, the tax collector, and all his tax collector friends wanted to have Jesus over for dinner. They didn't agree with what he was saying either, but they wanted to have to. Why? Because Jesus had joy. Joy must have followed Jesus everywhere he went. Man, he couldn't keep people away. Can you imagine the moment when Jesus was teaching on the side of the mountain and suddenly somebody goes, hey, there's about 5,000 people and they didn't bring any food. What are we going to do? And Jesus is like, got an idea. What we got? Bring it in. We got a couple fish. We got some loaves. Okay, hey, just start spreading out. Let me ask you, 1 to 5, joy level. What's it like that day getting a free lunch? A 5. Let me tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking people who didn't know who Jesus was wanted to be around Jesus, not because Jesus was powerful, but because he was joyful. Here's the last kicker I've got for you. Matthew and Mark both tell this story where Jesus is out there and kids starting to come to play with Jesus, and all the disciples go, hey, Jesus, you want us to send the kids away? And Jesus is like, no, this is the first fun I've had all day. If kids want to be around Jesus, he was not grumpy. And here's what I know you're thinking. Yeah, but when I serve people, man, I just feel like I'm giving everything away, and it's just so sad, and sometimes I get depressed because I'm giving away and not getting anything back. Then you must be doing it wrong. Because Jesus gave and gave and gave, and it made him happy. And here's what I think. I think our perspective is we're trying to trade our good for good from somebody else rather than just giving. And the giving, listen, the giving is an investment in somebody else's good, and that's where joy is found. But our perspective in this world is always to trade rather than generously give. So what if we, like Jesus, could see selflessness as the way to get to our joy? What if, like Jesus, we would shift our perspective? The intern at work, maybe we could just give him some ideas for the next meeting to move him forward. Not because we need credit from it or not because we want anything in return, because we just want to see the intern get better and do better. And I just want to see him grow. And maybe I'm going to give maybe something small to that official who's had a really bad game, and maybe it's just a simple on the way out, man. Hey, man, I don't know what to do. I got a gift card in my back pocket I got from somebody. You should have it. It's after the game. He already made all of his calls. They were all terrible. But you gave him something, right? I'm just saying, what if you switched your perspective from I'm trying to trade for joy, but I'm trying to give because I know joy is what in the giving of it. It's the investment in other people. I get to borrow everybody else's joy. And when I invest in your joy and I invest in your good, I fill up because I'm not waiting for something good to happen to me. I get to watch good happen to everybody around me, and that makes me happy. So what if we could switch the joy assessment around? What if we could switch it to where instead of just what we get, we start celebrating the joy in what other people get? And you're like, wait, Jarrod, this is way too much. I am just not wired like you. I get it, guys. I have a biological advantage I did not ask for. I'll be honest with you. This one jazzes me up and is easy for me. I've been up here before, and I've told you before, there's things that are hard for me, and I was being totally honest. This one, guys, I'll be honest with you, I am genetically predisposed to do this. Can't explain it, but I will tell you what the key is. You got to start with something small. You can't go in tomorrow and be like, I'm going to be Diego at Kroger. It's not, okay? Not going to work, okay? You don't do that. It's not authentic. It's really not you, and it doesn't look good, okay? Here's what I want you to think about. Paul says, you know what you need to start with? You need to start with something small. And this is what I love about Paul's letter, because Paul puts all this in place. He's like, this, Jesus was so selfless. You should be humble. You should be serving other people, and this is why. And it leads to joy in your life. And he says, and he gives them something really concrete and really small. But what I'm about to put on the screen, you guys do not want to hear. Okay? I'm going to warn you in advance. You don't want to hear this next part and the little small step you can take this way. You don't want to hear it because I can tell you right now, there's going to be an audible groan in the room, and it's okay. So here's what Paul says. Okay, you're not Jesus yet. You're not ready for selflessness. Okay, that's fine. Let's just start with something really, really small that you can do tomorrow and you can do every day to practice this. You ready? He says this, do everything without grumbling or complaining. Exactly. So here's the deal. Remember that word nothing earlier? Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Do everything. Wait a minute, everything? Even clean your room, teenagers. Hey, parents. Yeah. Even make dinner for the in-laws who don't treat you nice at Thanksgiving. Do everything without grumbling, complaint? Everything. You mean make the copies for the guy who always gets here late to the meeting and won't keep up with his own work? Make the copies for him so he can keep up? Maybe do that without grumbling and complaining this week. You mean don't grumble and complain about the terrible referees? Guys, they don't get paid enough for your grumbling and complaining. They don't. They're basically volunteers to get yelled at. That's what they volunteer to do. For your kids to be able to play a sport. Do everything without grumbling or complaining. Listen, we could just leave this one verse here for the next 5 years, and every one of us would be like, well, I failed on that one again. So here's what I want you to think this week. I don't need you to change the world with your joy. I want you to start with one simple perspective shift. If I could stop grumbling and complaining, what might I be able to pay attention to in the people's lives around me that might be worth investing in? That's the simple step this week. Just catch yourself when you grumble and complain, go, what if I instead of doing that, instead of saying that, I just invested in the good of people around me? You can make the shift slowly to being Diego, all right? Then maybe eventually you can make the shift to be Jesus, to be so humble and to serve so well that in every person you interact with, they walk away going, man, I would just like to be around them more. But I think this is the first level that we all need to pay attention to this week. So, selflessness, this is the big wrap up. Selflessness sets us up for joy. What does that look like for you this week? Who do you need to pay attention to this week that you've been ignoring? What projects at work do you need to shift your attention to, or shift your mindset about, or shift the way you engage with your energy about, because it's been draining you, you've been complaining, you've been grumbling about it, but what do you need to switch this week so that joy can be found in the midst of your humility and service and investment of other people? Who are the people around you who deserve your attention that you haven't been giving? And it may not be just the people you like. Who are the people that you need to be the joy for because they don't see where joy could be? Who? What? And now let me ask you this. Why? Why would you go and do this week? I'll tell you why. Because your joy depends on it. If you're only, guys, just statistically speaking, if you only celebrate the things that happen to you, you have way less chance of being joyful this week. Think of the number of times you could celebrate this week and grab on and borrow somebody's joy if you just celebrated what happened to the people around you. So tomorrow, when so-and-so shows up and goes, oh my gosh, I got free Dunkin' coffee. Can you believe it? It came in the app. I am a regular Dunkin' drinker and they never give me a free one. I'm sorry, that's just personal, okay? But if somebody comes out now, you know what the shift is? Number 5. Holy cow, you got a free Dunkin'? Dude, whoa. And you're like, that's going to sound authentic. Okay, well, do it your way. Hey, congratulations. I don't know how you do it, but celebrate because you are missing the opportunity to have joy borrowed from every person you see throughout the week. And you know why? Because your perspective is focused on me. What am I getting today? Just stop. Stop grumbling and complaining. Open up and just realize there is joy to be found. And maybe it's to be found in the people's lives around you that you're investing time and energy in. So take a time this week. Focus in on who needs your joy, when you can apply that joy, and maybe the grumbling and complaining will be the cue this week. They're like, oh gosh, I'm not paying attention. And let's be more like Jesus today, full of joy and draw people to us. Let me pray for you. God in heaven, would you just help us to be realistic with ourselves this week? God, would you help us to be honest with ourselves, so when we come to a point where we're grumbling and complaining about something, would you help us shift our minds to this idea that we need to invest in other people, that the people around us are worth investing in? God, if you came to die and rise again for every single person we interact with this week, God, then they also deserve our attention and our love. So help us to love them well, invest in their lives, invest in their good, do things for them and with them to help them see that our joy we can borrow. So we don't have to have good things happen to us to be joyful for the people around us. We can celebrate even in the midst of where we are. And I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hey, if you'd like more content like this, subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our Journey app to access all of our recent message content. And our app is the easiest way to share this content with a friend. For more information on our church or to find our app or our YouTube channel, just visit journeycalway.com. That's journeycalway.com. Thanks for listening.